Hello, Silas here, and this is You Are What You Consume, part 15. I'm pretty sure it's 15. And on Mondays, Stephen and I have been doing this series where we just come in and we talk about food and different things. And this one's going to be more of a general one compared to the Dishing on Dish series that we've been going on. We're still going to have more of those, but every Monday, if you're coming here, we're looking to set up different sites, different locations, and you'll also be able to find that. Contemplating doing a podcast version. But that's coming soon. So, Stephen, say hello to everyone. Just tell them a bit about what we're doing with the talk today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Today, Silas and I will just be doing a potpourri session of different topics that have been on our minds lately. We're going to talk a bit about Felidia, my last job. It came out that they're actually closing. I've known this for some time, of course, but the news is official now and that the building has been sold. There's going to be a new place. I was going to talk a bit about this old school cookbook I actually found as I was cleaning out my grandparents' house. That's what I was doing over the weekend. And just some things going on in the city as far as new restaurants opening, restaurants closing, potential places I'd like to eat. Just, again, just a few different topics that have been on our minds.
Yeah, Stephen, you go with potpourri. Stephen has a background in the food service industry. I was where there's so many other things you can go. You could go like a goulash. You could go with something like a buffet or something, something food related. You would like potpourri, which I think is more like the smelling stuff. But yeah, in general, that's what we're going to be doing. Potluck. It's a potluck episode of You Are What You Consume. And with the You Are What You Consume series, it started back in 2017 was the first one that we did. And we've been doing them ever since then, just in different kind of forms. And the basic idea behind that is that human beings, all life forms in general, are what we consume, like the fats, the carbohydrates, and the proteins that build up the body that we are. But then we go into human beings are more than just our actual food, more than the physical, then also the organisms that human beings make the society. What does society consume? What does society create? How does human civilization come around the food that we eat? Because that's a core thing that all life forms need, and it's a core thing that that we all have general interest in. So we've talked about different topics with that. And recently we started a Dishing on Dish series where Stephen goes to different restaurants all over New York City and comes and tells us about it. He's talked about places that he's worked, he's talked about places that he's been, and we're going to keep going with that series. But right now we're going to go back to kind of the roots or the foundation or the base. I don't know, let's try to think of like a food type of thing. The roux, not the roux, the stock.
Fond de cuisine. It's a French term, like foundations of cooking. It's FONDE. Space DE and then cuisine, foundations of cooking. It's kind of like that. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so we're going back to the fond de cuisine. Fond de You Are What You Consume. So we're going back to that foundation of it where we just talk about different things. The last one we had specifically where it was just general like this was talking about New York City. It was actually titled, I think I'll put that on the screen right here. It was actually titled, I think it was New York City, restaurants in New York City before, during, and after the pandemic, and that was way back in June 14th of 2020 when we thought things were going to actually be opening up from what was being said, and then now almost a year and a half later, we're still here. And then there was a separate talk that we had, separate conversation, it wasn't directly in the You Are What You Consume series that you can also check out, and that one was called it was just life of a New Yorker, of a post-pandemic New Yorker. So Stephen was talking about different things with the lockdowns coming, or the lockdowns, the effects of those, the mandates coming in, some other things happening, just talking to friends, people moving in and out of the city. And that was just in general life, because he is a New Yorker and he has been living there, and he's been out to the food industry professionally ever since his job was shuttered due to the pandemic. And then he's lucky enough to find other means to make a living, and he's also been we've been blessed to have him have the free time to come and have these conversations with us. So that was more just general talks about that. Now we're coming back with the food because there's some things like just going with the Dishing on Dish series. He's been back out to some restaurants. He's been talking to friends. He still knows people in the industry. Now we've actually seen the effects of the mandates coming in and places opening, places closing. So it's more of just a follow-up and just talking about different things, touching on different topics relating to life in New York City in the food service industry, and also talking a bit about what we're doing with You Are What You Consume and some of the things going forward. So anything else you want to say kind of with the intro here on that?
No, not really. Again, I mean, we'll do sort of this, again, just cover a few different things. I don't know if you wanted to ask me about Felidia closing, just different restaurants. I mean, I figured I'd sort of let you just, feel free to ask me whatever you'd want, and we can just
Yeah.
sort of take it from there. Because I didn't have anything specific really in mind. Sure.
Yeah. So I think we might as well start with Felidia, as you said. We'll start with a closing. Let's open with a closing, and this is an article here from what's this called? From eater.com. Eater. Eater. Why did they say the T? It's like eater. I feel like some Americans say eater instead of eater.
That's probably a regional thing. Like people in certain areas emphasize certain letters more than others, or something. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so Felidia is says here Felidia, the Midtown Italian restaurant that launched the Bastianich empire, closes, and Chef Lydia Bastianich has closed her decades-old restaurant. And this, like, I hadn't been to this restaurant. Steven's familiar with this restaurant. I hadn't been there at all. Did you work here?
Yeah, this was my last job. I was the floor manager. I was started as a server, and I became floor manager, and then I closed. So I would say I was the last floor manager of this restaurant. Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, I guess that's. I mean, he's not saying these things, but just shows like when people tell me information, it's in my head somehow. It's like related, filed, but it's like in RAM. I put it back in RAM because I'm like, okay, it's not being used that much. If you went back to the restaurant, maybe it would have come back again. But I just remember that he worked at Neta before this. So this is where you went after Neta.
Yeah.
Okay, and Neta's a Japanese restaurant, and that one is still open. And
Neta closed as well.
Oh, is there an article for that?
there is actually. I can find that for you as well, because what happened was Neta was slowing down, so I got laid off because my position got eliminated, and then the place closed a few months later because it was just sort of the tail end of the place.
Related. It was pre-pandemic.
No. This was before all of that. Yeah.
And you told me this, and I forgot.
Yeah. Clearly. It's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't really remember things that well, but that closed. That was pre-pandemic, at least. But Steven seems to be somebody if you hire, if you want your place to close. Clearly, that's the evidence that's being shown by this. and one of the last restaurants we talked about was Seasonal, which we need to look into that. They might be able to sue you for helping Seasonal close way back when. Maybe your un-Midas touch started from the second place you worked. Is the first place you worked still open?
I was. Yeah, Bar Balut, actually, it was interesting because Andrea and I ate there the other day, and I was thinking there's a bit of synchronicity because I had the pate en croûte, the pate with the crust, and that was our cover photo for the first video we did on this, so it's sort of, things coming back in a way.
Yeah, and then we were just talking before this, that's also in the cookbook that you found. So yeah, so these things are working. So the last time we talked about this was we were thinking, is Felidia going to open up again? Would Steven go back to his job now that he found a different kind of way to make money and make a living? Was he actually going to go back? At that time, were you considering going back? Like if they had reopened, would you have gone back?
Yeah, I was originally planning to because I thought, okay, we'll shut down temporarily for the pandemic. And then I even emailed one of my bosses saying, like, if this place opens, I would definitely come back. I mean, I enjoyed working here. And also, I wanted to put in some more time because longevity in a place looks good on your resume. So I figured to give it at least another year or something. And what I was thinking of doing is continuing my job as floor manager, and if there was a new GM, just work under them for a bit, and maybe down the road, if they leave, take over or something, if that option was available. It would have been too much for me off the bat, but I think eventually that would have been my goal, and that's what I was considering doing with Neta too before all that happened, where I'd worked under a few different GMs, and what I was going to do was work under them, and then after some time, be like, look, I've been here a while, I'd like the GM spot, and then run a place and go wherever from there. But in both cases.
Go ahead.
But I was gonna say both cases. I mean, neither turned out as expected, but that's life. So
Yeah. And with the GM position, I remember at least this. I do remember when you were working there because I kept thinking this when I was still in New York City. I kept thinking I might go down and have the omakase where the chef picks the different plates and things like that. But I remember you also started getting into different parts of the food industry of actually going and talking to the fishmongers at the docks, and you were getting more into the whole. So is that something that the GM typically does when you start getting to that level. You're in charge of kind of like a GM in like sports teams. They're in charge of like acquiring contracts, who's going to be on the team and things like that, like hiring and firing. So as a GM of a restaurant, is that more into the whole like we need to make sure we have the products, we can need to make sure we're hiring these people, you're figuring out salaries. Like what's the difference between that GM versus the position that you're in?
So at Neta, I was the assistant manager. I wasn't the GM, so I was basically the number two guy. So my idea is to sort of help the GM, and I had to do some of the paperwork related stuff. Like I learned how to do payroll. I learned how to do petty cash, where basically all the payments in cash, like you have to like calculate like, okay, how much in cash did we make? Then that has to get deposited into the bank, and then you have to get change. So you have change to give out to guests who come in. Payroll, it was usually the GM, but I learned how to do that too. Neta was not super hard because Neta had a very small staff, like 2 managers. I'm trying to remember, we had like maybe like 5 servers, like 3, 4 bussers. So like it wasn't a huge crew. Whereas if you run one of these really big places, you have a lot to deal with. I mean, there is software to help you do it, obviously, but like it wasn't super hard because of that. The cash deposit, also calculating server tips, like, okay, here were the sales for the night, here were the tips, and then okay, this is going to show up on payroll. Now, in the case of Neta, because it was owned by a hedge fund called Moon Capital, they were very good about helping us set all this up because they have more sophisticated financial systems and everything. So the accountant who was basically for the hedge fund as well as for us, he basically gave us the spreadsheet where you could just enter, these are the server tips for the night, and then it would calculate them up, and then check that, make sure it's good, send it to him, and then for payroll that would go through. So things like that. The GM, of course, worked with the beverage director in terms of ordering wine, sake, beer, all that, keeping track of that cost. Again, hiring and firing, like you say. But the food aspect of it, that's more the chefs, because the chef's job is to manage food costs as well as, yeah. I mean, I took something of an interest in that because of my career background, but it's like I didn't actively do it.
So what had led you, when you were sourcing that fish, you were sourcing fish for Neta, or was this just something on the side that you decided to do?
That was a side job that I did for a bit. Like basically I was a sales rep for a fish company briefly. Wasn't really my kind of thing. I mean, I got the job through people I had met at a previous job, and like, you know, it was some nice extra income, but it wasn't really for me though.
Are they still open? Or have you shut it down?
No, they're not actually.
Steven just goes, we need to put you in the government. You need to get a government job.
Do what Ron Swanson did, like sabotage it from the inside.
Maybe you can end the state somehow. We need to get you in all those sections. Okay. Okay, so I think going forward, maybe this is a relatively short article, so I think I'll just read paragraph by paragraph and we can just kind of discuss it, and you can give us some insights. You don't have to drop any names. You've already name dropped enough that you know some of these people. I skimmed this when you posted it before, so let's just get into it. And okay, so here we go. So 4 decades after celebrity chef Felidia Bastianich, is that Italian? What is that?
So she's Croatian. She's Italian and Croatian. So it's like she has some of her family's Italian, some's Croatia, but that's a Croatian name. That's why.
Okay. Sorry to the Croats out there who might be hearing this. Don't skewer me for saying Polish, but I was just thinking like the Eastern European type of areas. I definitely don't know the names. I think, but if you're from those areas, there's certain reasons like the itch and the ovich. Those things actually stand for something in the language that they come from that I have no idea of. Here in Kenya, like the names, some tribes have certain names where you can kind of tell like this is all the child of this, but then some tribes like my tribe, in general, they kind of just pull in names for different places and then it's mixed up. So I do understand that in some languages, especially with Europe, I'm not one of those people who thinks Europe is just like white people or just Caucasians. I understand there's a lot of diversity in the place. I've lived in Italy, born in France. Just apologies to the people out there.
Croatia is a part of the former Yugoslavia, for those who don't know. So this is a Slavic language. She actually speaks Croatian as well as Italian. Okay, cool. There were some people from the Balkans, and I guess like Croatian, Albanian, some of the languages are close enough that they can sort of understand each other. But I think like she could, like one guy I knew from Montenegro. That's the like Muslim, like that in Bosnia, the Muslim parts of the former Yugoslavia. He actually knew the Croatian language as well, so she would want to speak to him in Croatian, which I thought was kind of cool.
Okay. And so let's just finish the paragraph, and I got a few questions. So she opened Felidia, and then her esteemed It's 4 decades after her esteemed Midtown restaurant is quietly shuttered, and it looks cool because this kind of looks like a house that was converted into a
Yeah.
restaurant. So you could tell us a bit about that, and tell us also a bit about will this you have enough food from here that we can still do a dishing on dish on
Yeah.
this, right? Okay,
I
so
was
dishing on dish. Go ahead.
I was planning to do a presentation on that. I just have to compile all
Okay.
the photos and everything. Yeah.
So if depending on when you listen to this, you can click somewhere wherever you're finding the links for this. There'll also be links to the Dish series, and that's also in the You Are What You Consume series. So it will be part of the series coming up, and he'll tell us more details about the food. But can you tell us just a bit about the ambiance, the location? Was she primarily Italian food? Did it have a mix of the Croatian influence in there? Can you tell us a bit about this restaurant? That it looks nice and cozy, and it's a white tablecloth, but it wasn't a Michelin star. I mean, that's a typical thing. White tablecloth is a regular thing. I think for Michelin, you said they almost have to have it, but it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
only Michelin like have them. So tell us a bit about the restaurant.
Sure. So first off, the name comes from it's a combination of her ex-husband Felice or Felix, if you want to go by the English name, and Lydia. It was always funny because people would always come in and say things like, "Is Felidia here? I'm friends with Felidia." And I'm like, that's not her name. That's not her name. And we used to laugh because people would say things like, "I'm really good friends with Felidia." It's like we don't even know her name. That's where the name comes from. And apparently he used to be in the restaurant. Unfortunately, they divorced. I'm trying to think when it was, and he died maybe like 2008, 2009 or something. I think he died around when I came to the city. Of course, they kept the name for they didn't change the name, but he used to actually be in the restaurant. They said he used to actually play an accordion and sing in the restaurant, which I thought would have been interesting. There was no sound system here, which some people took issues with, but it used to be he would do that, and I think so I guess he would do that, and I'm trying to think if Lydia would sing too sometimes or something, but I guess that's just how they wanted to do it. So we made a point to say that it's not Italian cooking; it's food from specific regions. So it's Piemonte. Let's see, Piemonte. That's in the north. That's north
That's a
west.
Turin area. Yeah.
Yep. There's
Red Alps.
Friuli. There's Friuli. That's northeast, and that's Veneto, that area, and then also Sicily. That's actually where the last chef was from. So they like to say we're not an Italian place, we're a restaurant that features food from these regions, because a lot of people think, and they even go on to say this in the article, but a lot of people think of Italian food, they think red sauce and everything, and she's like, no, we were trying to get away from that, because one, Italy varies a lot, and also it's like you don't want to just put out a restaurant that serves what everyone else is serving. You want to do something different. So
Yeah. Once you get into, sorry, just interjecting there, like that's a good point there. I think once you
yeah,
get into the more defined, as I was mentioning, the reason I was apologizing for the Croatians, because there's diversity even within the countries.
yeah,
Like amatriciana is something that you would find in like Roman cooking, the Roman
yeah,
Lazio region, and that will have the tomatoes and stuff. That's because they'll grow the tomatoes there. Like you don't really have regions where it's like we don't grow this here, we ship this in from another region and use it. No, they don't do that. It's like they eat whatever they grow and farm in their location is what they eat. So you go to certain areas and it's essentially 90% fish. You go to certain areas, there's not a fish in the dish. But these are all different places in Italy, depending on the location that they're actually in. So that's kind of good to kind of pick and choose from these different places and say, okay, we're going to highlight this and that. Yeah.
well, I'd mentioned this too. I think, but like a lot of Americans think of as German cooking is really Bavarian food, like sausage, potato, pancakes, all that. But that's just based on who immigrated here, but also the food that's popular with Americans. So you go to a German restaurant, you're typically having Bavarian food. If you go to the north, you get more stews and like pickled stuff and other things. But it's just a combination of, again, who immigrated here, but also which foods are popular. So a lot of the Italians who came here were from the south, mostly Sicily, Naples, that area. That's where some of my family came from too. So that's why people think red sauce, pizza, all that, because they
Yeah.
were sort of recreating what they brought. Whereas Lydia's family is from the north, so they're recreating that. But then the chef was from Sicily, so he had more seafood, peppers, pistachios, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, that's like the last restaurant we talked about with Gabriel Caruso. That was from like the
Yeah,
Alsace Lorraine, and that's by the border. So there was some different influences
yeah,
from across the borders. And that's the thing; these human borders that we create are rather recent. Even the 500 or like multiple 100-year-old countries, those were places where it was very nebulous. like those borders might have been created when there were still duchies or still principalities or things like that, where that was a principality that was divided in half. And just because the border was there, it's not like automatically you're going to like stop dating or intermarrying or intermingling with the people across the border. So that's something to think of. And this is definitely something that I think is done a lot more in the United States of America. And this is not some polemic on the whole like build a wall type of thing, where people on the political left, and also the political right, whatever, people on the political left just think everybody south of the border is Mexico. This is Mexico. It's just Mexicans. It's like a race, a belief system, a language. It's like, no, there's a lot of diversity down below that border. A lot of diversity in Mexico in and of itself, let alone the rest of the places. Like, why do you think so many immigrants are like, okay, we're not going to stay in Mexico. We're going to just go all the way to the United States of America. It's not just for the welfare state. It's because they also understand that if they stay in Mexico, chances are they have to reduce more of their own personal, like cultural things. So they'd have to adjust to the Mexican culture. Yet in the United States of America, they might have more space and things like that to actually be more of their whole melting pot type of, be able to live their sort of lifestyle more, I think, than you would in most countries. At least from my experience, the amount of welcoming nature and ability to kind of carve out your little part and be accepted within the grander scheme of the thing and not always be a foreigner. Even if you're part of it, you're not always a foreigner in the United States of America. You can actually become American and still be your kind of self. That's something that I've seen a lot higher in the United States of America than most places. But what I will say about most other places, when you do make the attempt to learn the language, eat the food, get to the culture, they will accept you in as a foreigner that they've accepted, that they've adopted, but you never really be one of the people in there like you would if you have the background in there. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So okay. So I cut you off when you were telling us a bit about the history of this and the picking different areas and the things with the husband and the sound system. That's something you just pointed that out. And like I guess sometimes when I'm eating, I'm normally listening to some stuff. But if I go to a restaurant, I don't really care if there's a sound system. I haven't really thought of it, but I think most restaurants I have gone to, yeah, do have sound systems. Is that like how many restaurants in New York City don't have sound systems? Like you pointing that out, when who's complaining? Like,
well, I was going to say it's kind of interesting because I remember I was talking to one of the owners of Netto as I was leaving there, and we were saying how restaurants kind of go either way with the sound system. Like it's either very subtle music that you like faintly hear in the background, or it's like really like pronounced stuff that like is part of the theme. It's like it's usually one of those or the other. But as far as completely silent places, I mean, that was actually when my old GM interviewed me, he brought this up about no sound system here, and he's like, do you have any issues with that? And he's like, it's a funny question, but I ask that because some people complain about it. And it's like, I mean, I don't really care either way. Cause for me, in a lot of places, the music for me just becomes part of the background because you work there every day and you hear it over and over. You don't really notice. I don't know. Maybe there are people who have issues with that. Again, I don't care personally, but
yeah. I mean, now I'm going to start pointing that out. I'm gonna try and have the next couple of meals without listening to anything and just see how it is. Like, because yeah, I guess I'm normally listening to some audiobook or a podcast or something in the background while I'm eating. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I guess that could be a thing for people. Yeah. Oh. Do you have a preference?
Well, I was going to say it's interesting. Maybe we'll do a presentation on Netta, but Netta, what was funny is that Netta, we actually played 90s hip hop, like uncensored stuff. And it was always an interesting theme because it's like you go into this like quiet place, you get sushi and you hear like Biggie Smalls and Wu-Tang Clan and everything blasted. But people thought it was cool. And I mean, I liked it too. I mean, after a while, the novelty wears off, but like it was kind of cool. And then at one point, one of the later GMs tried to redo the music. It just didn't go over well because, like, if someone's like suggesting Japanese music, I'm like, who listens to Japanese music? Like, it's like no offense to them, but I'm like, our mostly American clientele is probably not going to be excited by that,
Yeah, maybe if they played like K-pop. And now again, don't get at me. I know there's a big difference between J-pop and K-pop, but I don't think the average New Yorker might actually be able to tell the difference between the two versions of it. I mean, I guess I prefer the J-pop more, and that's just more due to having a background of manga and anime and listening to playing a lot of role-playing games, so I prefer that sound, but that's personal advice. So yeah, you're tell us about this building. Like, how many restaurants have been just it's a house. It's a home.
So this opened in 1981. I think it was a townhouse before then. So the restaurant, you figure, was about 40 years old, which for New York especially, that's crazy. I mean, like how many places come and go. I remember we had this couple who came in where they were celebrating. I'm trying to remember if it was like their 30th wedding anniversary or something, and they're like, this is one of the only places that is still open that we went to in the past. I'm like, but
Oh
that's the thing.
wow,
I mean,
that's nice.
the majority fail within a year, and you figure like to last like 5 years is great, a decade is crazy. More than that, it's like that almost never happens. It's like unless you're an establishment place like this. Um, so it was a pretty good sized building. It was really interesting. So there was the ground floor. There was a second floor, which it had two areas that had a staircase, which was like a different dining room. There was an event space. There were actually three dining rooms built in that. There were different sized rooms. You could sort of adjust accordingly. One of the rooms could be set up for a la carte. You go up another set of stairs. There's actually the offices. Lydia's office was there. We used to actually have to go into that to deposit the cash and stuff. And it was really cool. Like she had all this memorabilia. Like she had pictures with John Paul II. She actually had a letter from Julia Child. For those who don't know, she was one of like the first like celebrity chefs on TV. She actually wrote Lydia a letter, which was hanging. I thought that was really cool. There's all the different books she's written, including signed copies, which were sold at the restaurant. And then you went up another floor. That was where it's our wine cellar, but it's technically at the top of the building. We had a lot of really cool stuff, like really old school Italian stuff that I'd imagine you don't see in a lot of places, like the kind of bottles that like are covered in dust because like they rarely get ordered. Yeah, pretty interesting stuff though. But yeah, it's a good sized building, and they said there used to be apartments in there, but I mean it's been some time, and the article gets on later. It's going to be bought up and made into another restaurant, but it definitely has an old school look. So I'm sure whoever buys it up, they're probably going to do a lot of work with it. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get to that next paragraph
Yeah.
here, actually. So in September, Bastianich sold the brownstone that's been home to the Italian restaurant since 1981 as part of a $4.7 million deal. According to Pinkasco, so I guess that's some probably a realtor company or something.
Yeah.
The building is now owned by Tony Park, the chief executive of real estate company PD Properties, who has worked with Harlem Shake. Is that like an actual shake shop, like milkshakes? Do you know?
I'm not sure actually.
Who's worked? Because I know the Harlem Shake dance. There's like
Yeah.
sometimes there's I think stuff like that. No, that song is my damn it. Okay, at the Angelina Bakery, Bonchon Chicken, Essen, and other food businesses in New York City. He plans to open an upscale Korean barbecue restaurant called Antoya in this space next spring, he tells Eater. So yeah, Angelina Bakery, I think I've heard of that. I haven't heard of these others. Essen, I thought was like a water. It was like a really expensive water. And have you heard of any of these places? Like we went over Harlem Shake, but have you heard of any of these other places? Have you heard of Tony Park or I know Korean barbecue? There's that actual area. It's not Koreatown, but it's like right by 47th Street or something. There's a lot of Korean like stores there, and a lot of Korean first generation Koreans and Korean Americans go there. I know they're out there a lot. I've seen a lot of restaurants there. It's like, is it called K-Town? What is it called? I might just completely,
Yeah.
I might just offending everyone's culture like in this whole video. I've gone to Asia. I've gone to Europe. I have Africa. I've offended Americans, South and North Americans. So I've got Africa left and Oceania. Okay, y'all next. Go ahead.
So you used to live near Koreatown. Actually, it's like
yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, 32nd Street or so. It actually, I think the sign actually says Korean Way. I went there with Dina. She bought me some beignets for my birthday. There's it's cool. They have like a lot of the barbecue places. There's a lot of like late night spots. A lot of people in the restaurant industry will actually go there late at night. You get barbecue. You can get what's it, soju, that's like their rice drink. You can get beer, all that. Yeah, a lot of barbecue, some more casual place. They have a bunch of bakeries too. They're very big on desserts as well. It's basically one street though. Koreatown is one street, like whereas like Little Italy was a series of streets. Yeah, it's kind of fun once in a while. Now Felidia was located on 58th between 2nd and 3rd, so it's near the Roosevelt Island Ferry. It's also a block over from the big Bloomingdale's. For those who are familiar, like I'm trying to like, there's not a whole lot else in that area. It's mostly residential and some small shops. I mean, it's a nice looking area, but it's like it's not the kind of place you really hang out in. So the Korean barbecue will be kind of interesting. See how that does there. I've been meaning to check out. My old boss told me there's actually a Japanese speakeasy where they play jazz. Like it's one of those like hidden places, but you go down, they play jazz, and you could drink sake and different cocktails, and there's like Japanese small plates. I've been meaning to check that out, but in general, like I say, I mean, there's not a whole lot going on in the area. Like That was even kind of a joke when we worked there. Like people asked about like, where's a good place to hang out around here? I'm like, we never hang out around here. It's like we come here for work and we go to another part of the city just because it's like it's mostly like older, middle-aged and older people with money living there. So it's like it's not really like the cool place to hang out. Like you got to go to the West Village or wherever. What else was I gonna say? Sorry, did you have another question? I was trying to think what else.
No, yeah, that's what I was saying. It's like I was saying, is it really like it can't really call it Koreatown? It's like a street. I remember it
Yeah.
being a street. Like I got it. I got 15 streets wrong. I got 15 streets higher. But yeah, it was a street. So it's like a street over maybe 2 blocks, like lengthwise, I think, or something like that. So
Yeah.
it was just yeah. But it's a place. It's definitely known. I just looked it up. Angelina Bakery, you can get nationwide delivery, and I think I'd heard about it that way. I haven't actually been there. Harlem Shake is a fast casual restaurant in Lenox Avenue and Malcolm X Boulevard in New York City. So I guess he runs that also. Bonchon is or it might be Bonchon, Bonchon. I'm not quite sure. It's probably Bonchon. Um, it's a South Korean-based international fried chicken restaurant franchise. And then Essen, I can't really Essen restaurant.
I think it's like a
It's a New York
sandwich.
deli. It's a deli.
Yeah, it's like a sandwich. Yeah, yeah. Essen is to eat in German, so yeah. And
Okay.
that's where the word delicatessen comes from because it's like delicat, like
Oh,
small, and then Essen
okay.
eat. Yeah,
Then
yeah,
Essen. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's in here. It's like the food, the service, the atmosphere. It's a second to none. It has everything. Has everyone leaving, attesting to the fact that there's nothing like FRSN at the Essen Delicatessen. Like, no, no. My background is in graphic design, and I remember getting into like having to like write copy and make this kind of marketing for people. These things just make me cringe, and really glad I'm getting more into like the studio and stuff, like more selective on the things that I'm working with, and have these conversations where it's just more organic and it's not like, oh man, endless cringe. Okay, so that was about the thing. So Antoya. Now Antoya, is that something? I'm wondering if that's a completely new place or is that
Yeah.
something? It's
I think that's a new place as far as I know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm just checking online, DuckDuckGo, to check Kantoya restaurant to see if it's a brand new one or if he's coming in with some already established one. But yeah, Korean barbecue, it's definitely raised in importance in popularity. I've seen it being expanding, and I've seen most major cities in the United States of America now have like a Korean barbecue type of place. And for those of y'all who don't know about it, it's normally like you actually sit there and it's actually like some heating implement, normally like actual coals and things like that. When you go to the actual authentic ones, like the coals or whatever, when you actually just have a grill out there and you get little cuts of meat and you put them on, or vegetables or other things, and you just kind of sit there. It's normally like a group thing. You don't really go to Korean barbecue by yourself, and it's kind of like there's some places where they have that hot plate where there's a flat kind of what are those things called, the flat cooking implements, the heated plates. You know, the ones where the chef's actually cutting stuff up, like what's that one place? Benihana used to. I think it was called Benihana.
Yeah, it's like a well, hibachi. You mean? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah.
where it's like they come and it's that flat thing where they slide the food around and things.
Yeah.
So it's not like that. It's an actual grill and things like this, and it's not a chef doing it for you. Normally, it's you and the group of people. You fry the stuff as it comes, and like the raw meat comes cut in like thinner slices and things like that. So if you haven't tried the Korean barbecue and you get the chance to, I highly suggest it. It's a nice group kind of experience. And yeah, I'm not seeing any of place with this. So I think this is a new restaurant coming into there. Took me like a standalone type of thing. Have you been to Korean barbecue?
Not in a little while. Like I said, when I worked, I worked at some places. We used to get out of work late, and we go to some of these places, late at night, where it's like they have like the selection of meats and stuff, and then like you pick what you want, and they cook it for you. It's kind of cool, but it's been a little while for me. I mean, I like it. It's just I don't know. It's not somewhere. It's not like my top pick regularly.
Okay, so it wasn't one of the ones where you cook yourself. It was like they actually make it for you.
Yeah, they're just like, okay, here's what we have to offer. Which would you like? And then yeah.
There was this place called Mongolian Barbecue I think that was a chain. I'm pretty sure it was a chain, but I know there was one in like Bethesda, Maryland. I used to really like going there in like high school. It was like more like a buffet style thing where you pick your stuff, you put it in a bowl, and then you give it to them. Then the chef had this like, it was like massive round kind of thing where there's like a hole in the middle where they'd scrape the stuff. And so you give them your bowl, and then they would kind of cook it up there and then give you back in your bowl. There's like salad, all this kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know if there's like Mongolian. It probably wasn't even Mongolian food. It probably wasn't because you're picking stuff out of there. Maybe the cooking implement wasn't, but I think it was just like a branding type of thing. But yeah, so yeah, that's what he's going to do with that. And this is back in September. So when did you first hear that she was going to sell? Like, did you have some inside knowledge to this? The time where, because like we talked about the last time we had this conversation was specifically about the food thing was June of 2020. So she made this sale in September. It said here, right? Yeah, it's so in September. So how between that time, like when did you find out?
Well, I was trying to watch how I put this. I was asking my boss, was the place going to reopen? I was getting kind of mixed messages. I talked to a few old employees, coworkers, and they were kind of saying we don't know either. So I came back here shortly after Easter. I originally came by like a week or two before just to sort of like make sure my apartment was okay and everything. I went over to the place. I saw a for sale sign on it, and I was kind of like, thanks. I didn't know, and I told some of my coworkers, and I was a little disappointed because I understood like it was very likely the place wouldn't reopen, but it's like there was no heads up or anything, and I was a little annoyed because there were certain people who worked there for years. Like there were a few people who worked there 5, 10. I think there was a guy who worked there 20 years, and it's kind of like it would have been nice to say sorry, we've decided to close the restaurant. Thanks for everything, but it's like I didn't know until I saw this sign, and then I saw this article. By the time this article came out, I knew already, but it's just like a little more of a heads up would have been nice because there are certain people who saw this and they're like, oh, I don't want to work for them again. And it's just like, it came across as very ungrateful to people who've been with you a while. Again,
Yeah.
if a restaurant doesn't want to reopen, that's their prerogative, but it's like at least give people a heads up because it's also like a number of people, like myself included, we were like, we're willing to come back, but it's like we can only do that if the place reopens. But if it's like we may reopen, we don't know, and then we don't hear anything, and oh yeah, we're closing, it's like people aren't going to put their lives on hold forever, and a bunch of people were kind of like, oh, they didn't care, and it's just like that really rubbed me the wrong way, and it's a shame too because I really liked working here and I was going to go back, but it's just like it left a bad taste in the mouth of some of the people
Yeah.
who had been there for.
I can imagine, and especially since this is, we know businesses in general. Most businesses, it's like what, like 85% of businesses across the board. Any business started normally ends in the first 2 years, and then we know that the restaurant industry is even like a thinner margin with that. The turnover in that is big, as we've talked about in previous series, and the I Know Great People Talk where we had that. And now to have this restaurant go so far against that whole thing to be a 40-year long restaurant, as you said, to have somebody, to have those kind of last type of places where in a big city like this, I'm sure there might be smaller ones, smaller town type of places where it's like in a family, somebody's working there their whole life. But to have places where you have these career people at one location like that, hopefully maybe she told them, they were told that they didn't pass it on to you. Maybe there's some kind of connections there. Maybe you can think that when you're selling something of this kind of high amount of money, you don't know if talking about it, somebody might leak the information, or maybe in the talks, there might be talks of, like, how many times, this is one thing you can tell me, how many times do things get sold like this, where the entire people who run the things, if it's a family, like sell the entire restaurant and then the restaurant remains as is? Like, is that something that's really infrequent? Like, how often is it? Could there have been a chance where they were thinking, we'll sell it to this guy and he'll keep it open like this? I don't know.
I don't think so, because bear in mind, Lydia is about 73 now, and also I don't know if you remember, her mother passed away, I think about a year ago or so. She had just hit 100, and she used to actually work in the restaurant. Like I was saying,
Wow.
I would like to have gone back in time when she was working the front desk, and like people would call running late, and she'd be like, "I'm an 80-year-old woman. I'm here on time. What's wrong with you?" Like she's really really tough. And if you watch some of Lydia's cooking shows, there's episodes where they work together, and it's pretty cool. Like Lydia's mom is like, "Wow, my mother taught me how to make this pasta when I was younger," and it's like, wow, how far back does that go? But it's pretty cool they preserve those traditions. But I think it's a combination, probably, I would guess, of her mother passing on. Lydia, 73. She has some issues with her knees, so she can't get around as well, and she still has her show and other things. So I think she's just kind of winding things down because it's like running all these restaurants and the show, and I think it's getting to be a lot. But she strikes me as the type of person who likes being busy too, but at the same time, it's like she can only push herself so hard at that age. So I think she probably figured it's time to call it quits. And especially, I mean, her ex-husband, of course, no longer around. Her mother's gone now. The place was gradually going down in terms of business. Nothing against the restaurant itself, but I think we may have talked about this previously. But what I often said with Felidia was that a lot of the clientele was aging out. Like there were people who came there about when it opened and were still coming in recent years, and a few people had actually passed away in recent years because they came to the restaurant when they were like 30, 40 when it opened, and then like decades later they're just 80 or whatever. Like we had a Nobel Prize winning doctor used to come. He actually passed away, I think, like 2 years ago. His widow still came in. We had this one guy. He used to come in by himself. Apparently, he came in with a group of 4 people. They all passed. He's the only one left. So this was happening, and then the challenge becomes, if you try to overhaul the place, those older people are going to say, we don't like this. It's not what we remember. But at the same time, you can't rely on them either because they're not going to be around. So the restaurant was in a very strange spot. But because most restaurants don't last this long, it's not a problem you usually have to deal with. Usually a restaurant lasts, a year or 5 years, whatever, closes. Okay, you just open something different. But because you've had people coming here for decades, it's like, it's like, how do you maintain a certain clientele and how do you appeal to a new clientele without alienating the ones you have? And it's a very tough thing to deal with, I think. Yeah.
And then, of course, it also depends on the restaurant. Like we're saying, she's borrowing from her actual history. So if somebody else comes in, they won't be able to just make the same kind of. The feel is going to be different. Yeah, you can't take Felidia out of Felidia and still have it be Felidia.
It's her brand basically. It's like you can't just like copy it. Because I was gonna say Minetta Tavern has actually gone under multiple owners. So Minetta Tavern opened, I want to say, in 1938, and it's obviously it's gone on several owners since then, and it's currently owned by a man named Keith McNally. But he's a restaurateur and he owns a bunch of different restaurants. So at one point he bought it out, and I think the way it works there is, if you notice, the decor is kind of older school, and there's certain menu items that have been there a while, like the bone marrow, the burger, all that. But then everything else is tweaked slightly, so they're sort of operating in that range of like, okay, let's do the classics well, and let's throw in a few things to sort of keep it somewhat new. But because we've been around for so long, we can do that. Whereas if I open a restaurant now and I just like serve the stuff Minetta serves, it's going to seem really out of place because it's like you're doing all this old school stuff in a brand new, it doesn't seem right. But I think with them, because of their image, their brand, the way they built it up, it kind of works.
Yeah, that was the first one we did on the Dish on Dish series, so y'all can check that out. By the time this is out, that's definitely been out. I think that was back in your Where You Consume. I think it might have been number 8. It might have been the first one we did right after talking about. Have we been doing this for 2 years already? Oh wow. Anyway, so I guess we can go to the next paragraph here and keep this going. This article. So. At Felidia, Bastianich introduced regional Italian cuisine to New Yorkers who were most familiar with Italian-American red sauce cooking. The menu turned to Istria, a European peninsula shared by Italy, Croatia, and Slovenia. Fans of the restaurant came for the seasonal cooking, such as its poached fruit with pate and pastas and slow-cooked sauces. Those efforts were rewarded with 3 stars from the New York Times in 1995, and a follow-up review by Frank Bruni, a former critic, raved about the risotto dish infused with beets, writing that it could keep Felidia going strong for another quarter century. And I guess that was right. Yeah, quarter century. He got it almost on the dot, a little bit above. Yeah, almost to the dot because it initially closed last year. So yeah, I guess, where's Frank Bruni now? Get that man to predict things to us. He's the Machiavelli of the food industry. But yeah, it's not. I mean, you've said a lot of these things already, but yeah, just give us some thoughts on that paragraph.
Yeah, so Istria, again, that's because Lydia has both Italian and Croatian ancestry. Also, too, remember that those borders shifted a little bit back and forth. If you remember, I always bring up Churchill's Iron Curtain speech about from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste and the Adriatic, because that was where the Iron Curtain went to those countries. And part of the reason she and her family came to America, Lydia was younger, of course, but it was that Trieste was basically given to the Soviets, and they were realizing like, okay, we have to get out of here. So there was something with the Red Cross and the Catholic Church, and they were able to come here as refugees. And since then, Lydia, I know, of course, has done charity with the Catholic Church and everything. And I haven't read the book. I feel like I should, but she actually has a personal memoir. It's called My American Dream, and she gets into all of this, and she explains about like being in the refugee camp, coming here, working in restaurants. I don't know if we ever talked about this, but she and Christopher Walken are actually good friends, and they actually both work together in his family's bakery in Queens. So like whenever there's a cookbook that comes out, like he gets like a signed copy like immediately. He actually was on her show and they cooked some Italian food they grew up with together. She has a funny story about, I guess they had to deliver a wedding cake and like she destroyed it or something. And like, yeah, it's pretty cool. I never got to see him in the restaurant, but it's cool that they've stayed friends all this time. I mean, even when they both went on to become very successful. So yeah, it's a combination of those different regional influences. Like I say, very big on the regions. The New York Times stars, I don't think we really talked about it. It goes 1 to 4 stars. 4 is the highest you can get. We had 3, and when I left, we still had the 3, so we retained that, which is really good. No, we didn't have any Michelin stars. We did have Michelin recommended, but no stars. But fortunately, an advantage we had too was that our chef, which we'll get into in the next section, he was there since 1996 because he wasn't the opening chef, but he came on later. But because he was there, the food was consistent because it's his dishes as well as hers, and he can make sure it's the same. And that's a challenge in restaurants, especially ones where chefs come and go, because chefs come and go. It's hard to be consistent, whereas you have the same person there. They know exactly how things should be. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so let's get into that next one. Yeah, it's some good stuff there. Yeah. Had you heard of Frank Bruni before?
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't followed him super closely, but I've seen in reviews written by him and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, so he's still in the industry, he's still working.
I don't think he writes for the New York Times anymore, but
Saying former critic. So I don't know if he's saying former critic is in general as in former New York Times critic or just former critic. Maybe he's retired. I don't know.
Yeah, he may have retired. I'm not really sure. I haven't. Again, he's one of those. Oh, he still works for the New York Times, but yeah, he joined in 2011. He's been an op-ed columnist since 2011. He joined the paper in '95. Yeah, I guess he still works for the paper, just in a different capacity. I'm not sure why the change, but.
Well, he looks kind of. I mean, I guess some people get to a certain age and they just look the same for like 30 years, and then they get older looking. Because he looks kind of young. I'm like, for him to be giving these kind of reviews in '95, I'm like, this is like I just moved to the United States of America from Kenya in '95. Okay, so all right. So next paragraph. The closure marks an end of an era for Bastianich, who opened her flagship Italian restaurant at 243 East 58th Street near 2nd Avenue roughly 4 decades ago. Though most of its cooking had been performed by chef Fortunato Nicotra since 1996, the kitchen served as a launching pad for the Bastianich cookbooks, television programs, and supermarket sauces to come. The matriarch of the Bastianich family followed up with Becco, which she opened with daughter Tania Bastianich Manuali in 1991, and Deposto in partnership with son Joe Bastianich in 2005. So are those restaurants still open?
So Del Posto closed, unfortunately. I know they were struggling a bit before the pandemic. Like I remember they used to have a piano player, they used to have a doorman. Those guys actually got laid off. And yeah, and I know. Well, Del Posto too was way more intricate than Felidia. Like some people complain Del Posto was pretentious. Like it's one of those where like each section has like its own sommelier, and it's like you're finished with a plate, like 3 people run over, and like one clears it, one wipes, all this.
No.
I never ate there personally. I've been in there, but it's closed now, so that's not going to happen, unfortunately. One of my friends actually said he preferred Felidia in terms of value as opposed to Del Posto. Like Felidia was a bit cheaper, but he felt like what you paid it was better, like relative. Again, I didn't eat there, so I can't say. Becco's still open. Becco's on Restaurant Row. I have not eaten there. I know. That was they mentioned Tanya, that's the daughter, but I think that was Joe Bastianich's first restaurant that he opened. Again, I haven't eaten at Becco. Becco's another one, like the menu. It's kind of like it's stuff that's like been there for a very long time. Like they have like a salad with like prosciutto and stuff. Not stuff that I'm crazy about. I know our event manager used to go there a lot because she got a discount. She saw a lot of Broadway shows, so like it's worth it. Yeah, Fortunato's been the chef. He was the one I worked with. He's from Sicily originally. He worked in Turin as well. He actually won Michelin stars when he worked in Sicily, they said. And when Felidia closed, he actually worked at Babbo for a bit at the restaurant I was telling you about. I'm gonna go eat in a few days. And he actually worked there for a bit, I guess, because Felidia closed, they kind of gave him work there, but he actually moved to Washington D.C. recently. I don't know if he's opening his own place or what, but he had this big Instagram post about like thus ends a few decades of partnership. You know, thanks guys, it's been great. Moving on. So I'm wondering if he's trying to open his own place in D.C. His wife actually works for Lydia as well. She's like a producer or something with the show. She used to work in the office as well. Really, really nice lady. So I thought that was cool how they both work. They both work for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing the pictures here of Becco. It looks more like a more contemporary, lighter type of, more airy type of place. It looks more laid back and chill. But then the Del Posto, it makes me think like it'd be something like on a cruise ship or in a casino. It's like kind of dark and seems a bit overbearing. It's like something you'd see like in like a Godfather movie, like some newer age Godfather gangster type of mobster type of thing. I guess it appeals to some people, but yeah, I can just from looking at it. This is completely neophyte amateur self. I can understand why one is open and the other isn't. It seems like Del Posto might have been aiming to try to get some sort of prestige that is normally that I think is normally something that is gained over time. Because if this is a place that was just opened, when did they say they opened Del Posto? 1991. Okay, so all right. So if it opened in 1991, I can imagine this kind of design being done in 91. It's like, yeah, we're going to go with this, and then having some slower updates to it. It looks massive, though. It's huge.
It is. Yeah, Del Posto also at its peak had 2 Michelin stars. I think they may have lost one at one point. I don't know if they gained it back. But that was Batali's flagship though, because you know, like Babbo, the one that Andrea and I are going to go to, is like, it's nice. Like they have white tablecloths at Babbo too. But Babbo's a little more like Felidia, like it's a little more casual. Whereas Del Posto's like really white tablecloth, like I say, very intricate service. Piano player. They had a doorman, like, you know, really, really intricate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's no name of Steven the restaurant killer involved in any of these things. Should have given Eater the little sleep. They will listen to this You Aren't We Consume series. They would have known about you. But no, that's just not in there. But yeah, you mentioned Battaglia, and he's up here in this next paragraph. So I'll read this and then ask you some questions about him, because I'm wondering, like, yeah, you can tell us about the relationship between the two when we get to this. Okay. So despite an earlier acclaim from the Times and others, the restaurant has been plagued by multiple wage theft lawsuits in recent years. I blame Stephen. In 2018, the Bastianich family and Mario Batali agreed to pay out $2.2 million after a former busser at the restaurant filed a class action lawsuit against them. A year later, 2 former employees alleged that they were illegally paid tipped wages and denied They were illegally paid tipped wages and denied overtime pay, and the suit was later settled for $10,000. So paid tip. So they were supposed to be paid a regular wage instead of tipped wage. Yeah, can you? Yeah, I guess you could touch a bit on that. There seems to be some things.
By the way, I didn't work for them in 2018, so this has nothing to do with me. but so there were different I've heard different sides of this story. Like my boss told me, I think I'd mentioned in a previous video, the whole thing about how you couldn't come into work and like set up early, because apparently what had happened was people were told like come in at 4, but then people would come in at 3:30, punch in and work, and they would be like, sorry, we can't pay you for this, and it'd be like, oh well, I was here anyway, and you're saying no because the owners are requiring that you can only work so many hours. But the thing was, people were trying to do that to milk the clock. So if you're scheduled like 40 hours a week and you come in early a bit each day, that adds up. So then it maybe gives you like 5 hours of overtime or whatever, and you keep doing that, you're milking the clock. But then what would happen again, people would come and do that, and they'd be like, oh, they'd be like, sorry, we can't pay you this. So then people would just do it for free. But then what they would do is they would show camera footage saying, look, I was here working at 3:30, I was scheduled for 4, they didn't tip me. And it's like, well, sorry, we didn't pay you. But then it's like, well, we can't pay you those extra hours anyway, and we didn't ask you to come in early, you just did it yourself. There were other issues too. Like I remember there was a sommelier who used to have the busters help unload like the wine upstairs, and like somehow there was some old technical thing where that wasn't officially in their job description, so they weren't supposed to do that. There's stuff with Lydia asking us to unload her car, and people, I guess, like tried to, like, there was a lawsuit with that, like, oh, she's making us do things. I think it's stupid. I mean, I don't mind helping, my elderly boss unload her car. I don't really see, but because there are people who take advantage of this stuff too. Um, as far as illegally paid tips, there are rumors about managers pocketing cash tips and stuff. I don't know. Again, I don't know the different sides of that. Because there that can go either way. Like I remember worked in a place where a boss actually did that, but then there also are rumors like spread around. So I mean, I don't want to accuse anyone if I don't know what happened, but that's why I remember, like, my boss was very strict about all these things about, like, don't punch in early. If you're clocked out, just leave, don't hang out, because again, people would do the other side of that. They'd be like, oh, they made me stay late and didn't pay me. And it's like, no, we told you to leave, go home, because then also other things, like if someone gets hurt or something, they can be like, oh, this happened on my off time. And it's like, well, you're not supposed to be here anyway. So, a lot of those things, like, I've been very conscious of, since then. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess you entered right after this $2.2 million payout, right?
Yeah.
Oh man. So yeah, okay. So Mario Batali is somebody that I was definitely familiar with from the news and stuff like that, from Food Network and things like this. So what's his relationship with Lydia, the
So
Bastianiches?
Well, the group was originally called B&B, or Bastianich and Batali Group, and they actually opened some of these restaurants together. Like Del Posto, they both ran. I think Babbo was just his originally, although Joe Bastianich helped with wines. I think Becco was just them, but basically, I guess they ran several of these together, and then this whole sexual harassment thing came out with the Me Too thing, and all these women that I guess he, I've heard some pretty bad stories about him. I guess they all came out and accused him, and then the Bastianich has basically just bought out his portion of the restaurant. They're like, okay, this is all ours now. And I guess they renamed the group. I forget what they called it after that. But, he basically just took the cash and I guess moved to Martha's Vineyard or something. And, they did this whole, like, denouncement of him. And there were rumors for a time that he was trying to make a comeback, but I don't see it happening at this point because I remember, the other restaurant they owned was the pizza place, Odo. That was actually down the street from Netta. And I remember one of my friends telling me when this came out and Batali stepped down, like, their business dropped by half, like, right away, because it's like a combination of people were mad about the Me Too thing, but also there were other people who were like, this place isn't going to be the same without him around. So it was a combination of those factors. And it's like, how do you, I don't really know how you bounce back from that. I mean, I'm not even sure you can. Oh, I think Odo closed too as well. So,
Yeah, at least with that Me Too thing, there's some things. I'm for information. I'm for the truth of the facts, things being out there. What happened, and there is this whole thing. A common thing I say is problems occur not because of what X is, because of how we define X. And these relationships happen. These things happen for various reasons. There's some people who thought, in order for me to move forward in work, I do this with this person and I'll get this position. And many of those situations, those people did get those positions. There's many people in other positions who say, by me achieving this level of skill in this, it will grant me access to this kind of person. And that's what they do. And that arrangement is not something that I am completely against. If somebody, like, there's that seeking arrangement site where someone's like, I want to be a sugar baby, I want to be a sugar daddy.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that if it's in the open. If both people come and they both understand, this is what we decided to do, and we're going to go out, and this is what we want, and this is what we're accepting. If you go to a restaurant, I don't care what you're serving in your menu. Just list, when I order something off the menu, I want that thing to come off of the menu. The bad thing is this. If you give this waitress the money, he's going to bring you something else special, and if you don't give this person, he's going to do. That's the kind of stuff. So, getting these people exposed, I think in general, there's some negative things that have happened to it. But now, getting to an environment where people are more open about this, for some time, there's going to be some people who are completely willing and able and want to actually engage in that kind of thing. But I want the business industry to restructure itself. So if you want to be in a field where this favor is given back and forth for career advancement, let that be that field. If you want a field where it's just strictly the business, let that be that field. But let's not pretend that it's been entirely people preying on the others and people not knowing. Because when it comes down to it, you ask, why were all these people quiet all this time? And right now, if you're in a position that you're being preyed on, or you know somebody preying on someone, realize that in the time that we live in now, you can talk to somebody, you can get some help. Don't just be quiet about it because you need to make your money here, you need to do that, because you not being targeted by this person could lead to somebody else. Or if you find somebody on that other aspect trying to use their body to advance themselves in this way, that's also unfair to the other people who have the abilities. So try to talk to that person. Just speak out against this. I think in general that's a positive thing to see there. So yeah, even if people are skilled, some people might not care. You know,
Yeah.
look at the politicians. Most people don't really care about politicians doing a lot of the things that people in more private industries get erased from this public office. Like the most recent person is like John Gruden in the NFL. I'm like, okay, so you mean to tell me John Gruden, for while he was working at ESPN, while he was working in the NFL for this time, like nobody knew that he had these thoughts until now, and you mean to tell me he's the only one, or like, or are these people just so blind to seeing things, or do they know and decide this person is still making us money? ESPN knew, and they're like, okay, he's still bringing us like all this money from Monday Night Football, so we're going to be quiet. So who are these people that you're trusting to get you in this environment? And you see, like, there's been good restaurant ender people like Steven working at this place, and these other people's lives get affected when you keep letting these people get to those higher positions and be involved in these kind of things without getting to that point. For all my experience, I don't think Steven slept with anyone to get to this position, but no. This is the thing. You can check out the talk that we had tonight. I know great people. Even talking about the food service industry with the different issues, and there's also that one meme where it was like where the front of house dates the back of house. It's like some kind of like clean, like preppy looking looking women, and then all these tatted up guys. So those different intricacies and things like that in the industry. I think in most industries there is some of that fraternization within it, even if there's overt rules against it. It's men and women. We live because of reproduction. It's part of the drive that we have, and there's going to be complications with this. So yeah, just
well, I was going to say, I mean, it is complicated because the controversy that always came up, especially with the Bastianich family, is that like how much did they know this about Battalion? We're pretty sure, like, come on, you were business partners with these guys for years. You know, Mario had an apartment above Bobo. Joe, you sang at parties there. Like, I'm sure they saw stuff. It's just they were in that position of, this guy is our partner. He has a big following. He has a big brand. If we oust him, it's going to cripple our brand. So they're in that uncomfortable spot of, okay, do we honestly out him and then it hurts the business as it ultimately did to a degree? Or is it we kind of go along with this and hope nobody notices? But then it got to a point, especially with the Me Too thing. That's why it's called that, because one woman comes out, then another, and they're like, we all experience this with him. And at that point, it's like, it's too toxic to associate with. And it's like, we can't associate with this guy. So, I mean, it's good that he got exposed, but at the same time, they're doing this whole like, this is a disgrace, we're ashamed of him. It's like, come on, I'm pretty sure you guys knew what was going on, before this.
Yeah. And that's me. I have a separate video on that. I just don't like when people come out and like, oh, we always suspected that there was something with this person. We denounce. And I think there is something in human nature or just existence where people would rather be perceived that they could see danger and then make a decision to not say anything versus being somebody that is unaware to see danger. Because you see this always, oh, yeah, we always knew there was something wrong with this guy. This guy was always kind of weird. Oh, I never really hung out with this guy that much. That's something for me, I think I've been pretty good at noticing rather early when I was still in like high school and like in college. Sometimes we'd be in a group of people that were like, I don't really like that person. I stopped hanging out with them. And a few other people would still hang out with that person. Like, why you stop hanging out? And then like a few months later, they'd be like, okay, yeah, we start hanging out with that person too. And I guess at that point, I was able to pick out and then make the decision to move apart. But I think in part by having this platform, having friends like Steven, just getting more into like the honesty and having that as a value and a virtue and having certain standards and principles coming off of that, I'm able to speak out and talk about that. And that's what I'm hoping to build this platform, work with people who I'm comfortable with, get a nice base, get the support of the people who are listening, and thank you all out there for listening to this content, where I can just come out and just talk to people about actual things that are happening in their life and not have to worry about, oh, I got to keep this secret in order to do this. But at the same point, some of these situations I do understand why some people don't speak out, because you feel like it's not your story to tell. You know, you might say something and expose someone who is in a hard place. So it's a tough situation. It's a tough thing. Yeah.
Another thing that just occurred to me was there was a place called the Spotted Pig. It was like a gastro pub. A lot of people would hang out late at night, and Batali was actually one of the main investors there. And there was a room upstairs where I guess like he'd have his way with women. They even
Oh no.
nicknamed it. I'm not gonna say the word, begins with R, ends with E. That room. And the thing was, this was known for a while, and the thing was, it was a similar thing with April Bloomfield, the chef owner. She owned this, the Breslin, a few other places. She's like, I didn't know about this, and everyone's like, bullshit. It's like this happened in your place that he was an investor. I'm like, you had no idea. Come on. It's like, and then her restaurants took a hit too because of her association with him. So same thing. It's just all this is coming to light now, but it's like they said anyone who hung out there regularly who was in those circles, everybody knew what was going on. It's just it took a few women coming out, and then it became a cascade of like all these other women came out, and eventually it's like, okay, we can't be associated with him anymore. Yeah.
Mm,
I
yeah.
noticed. Well, I was going to say with Batali too. He reminds me a bit of like the whole thing with Weinstein, where it's like neither of them are very attractive men, but they're gatekeepers to certain things. So they're the kind of guys who resented women not being interested in them, but then they get this power and it corrupts them. And then it's, oh well, now all the women want something that I have. I can do this, and it's really disgusting. I mean, I'm no Casanova, but it's like I would not do something like that's just sick to me.
Yeah. I mean, this is like you are what you consume. This is kind of
Yeah,
like these are things that this is like what consumes you. Like
yeah,
you are consumed by these things when you have this kind of thing in your environment and things like that. And now there might be other things that actually even go into this. Maybe there could be things where again, this is I'm not a psychiatrist, but I'm not trying to go into this, but I can imagine if Lydia knew about some of these things, now she's getting to this point where the few people that were maintaining to her were in there, where maybe if it was just a completely brand, like open, free, happy type of thing, she'd still feel the energy, but then maybe investing in this, because now she said she's doing her show, and that was completely her by herself, right? Or is
yeah.
Batali involved with the show at all?
He had no, no. He had his own. He had a few shows on the Food Network. The thing is, they
Yeah,
each had like he was on the Food Network a lot. He had a few shows. He was on other things too, but a few of the restaurants they worked together. A few were just them, but it was all under the same umbrella. But he was almost like Emerald in a way, where they had these moments where they were on TV like all the time, and they just
yeah,
kind
they're
of
just so
faded.
hot for some time. Right?
Yeah. And I think because with Batali it was like popularizing Italian stuff, but also he was someone who helped popularize offal meats, like the organ meats again. And like that stuff had kind of faded, but I guess because he was a Food Network star, all this, people trusted him and were willing to have some of this. Like I looked at the menu at Babbo, they have lamb tongue. So I'm thinking about maybe trying that or something. But the thing is, like, a lot of this stuff was going out of style in the States, but because people trusted him, they were willing to try this again. So he brought some of that back. Plus, all these different pasta dishes. And, I mean, Babbo was great last time. Hopefully, he'll be this week too. So I think he'll popularize that. And Lydia, I'm trying to think if her show started 80s or early 90s, but she was sort of like Julia Child was the first one with black and white, and you had Jacques Pepin, some of them, but she was sort of like the wave after that. Like she was on PBS. Then after that, you had the Food Network and all these other people. So she was like something in between those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it started and
Yeah.
we started a bit more of an upbeat thing, kind of talking about this, like the open and closing. Now we're closing in this kind of lower somber suit, and this is the closing paragraph of this article as well. So it says it's not clear at this time whether Felidia will open at another location, and ITER has reached out to Lydia and Tanya Bastianich for more information. And I guess you can reach out to Stephen, but from what you said, you haven't heard anything on, probably unlikely, right? What are your thoughts on this?
I doubt they will. Like I said, I'd imagine Lydia is winding it down because I mean she's getting up there, and it's like she doesn't want to do this forever. And it's like, I mean, I don't know what her finances are. I doubt. I mean, it's not like she needs the money because it's like,
Mhm.
it's just she was taking care of her mother, but of course her mother's gone now, so she lives. I guess she either lives by herself, or I think she lives near the family, near Tanya and her husband. So it's not like she really needs the money, and plus she has cookbooks. Oh, they own Eataly too. I don't know if you're familiar with
Oh,
that. I think
yeah.
you live not too far, so they own. So it's like I think she has enough money coming in where it's like she doesn't need to make millions of dollars in the next few years. It's probably just like keep a few things going so she can live a certain lifestyle, but like I don't imagine her opening new places or anything at this point. It just like I feel like for her it's probably more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, Italy is it's a well put together place. It's almost like an
Yeah.
amusement park restaurant type of
Yeah.
environment. It's like a
Yeah.
mix between like a museum, gallery, park, restaurant. It's an interesting kind of space. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what would it fall into the food industry? Is it like a supermarket? It's a really interesting space.
It's a
It's almost
combination
like a thing.
restaurant, shop, like it's like a
Yeah,
few
it's almost
different
like a
things kind of.
tourist type of place where it's almost
Yeah.
like if you're in New York for like a week, it's almost like one of those tourist destinations you should actually just check out. Like it's an interesting feel. I like what they did with that place.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's it for Felidia. And I think maybe to finish this part off, I know we had mentioned things with cookbooks and things like that, but with the You Are What You Consume series, we've been doing the Dish on Dish. So we'll be focusing on that. And we're actually now getting in more people on the Dish on Dish to come in and talk to us about some of the people who have been to dinner with Stephen, but also we'll start reaching out to people at restaurants to focus on that or have other people. Like we talked to Jacqueline on I Know Great People series, and she knows some places in Taipei, in Taiwan. So we'll start now expanding that series as we're focusing a lot of energy on the I Know Great People series, which is also going to be another weekly thing every 6 days. But with this one, we're still going to be doing every Monday, and we'll start interspersing these conversations on the Dish on Dish with also these You Are What You Consume. So I don't know, maybe once we'll figure it out. Maybe every 4 weeks or something, or every fourth episode, it'll be a general talk about something. So yeah, I think you could tell us a bit.
I actually have the Felidia Cookbook right here.
Okay.
My mom asked for one for Christmas of last year, I think, and we actually got one complimentary just for working there. And I just bought another one for mom. This is Fortunato and Lydia on the back here.
Okay.
And then it's signed by her as well. So I have another signed cookbook. It's cool.
Interesting.
So it's cool because the book gets into it's like a lot of the recipes, like the ones mentioned in this article, but also she gets into a bit of the history and like where it came from, the ideas, what was influenced by what, how Fortunato came on, and a lot of good photography. And it was pretty cool because I actually worked there when this book was being written, so I saw like photographers came in and they were recording them cooking. And it was really cool, actually. Yeah.
Nice. So that's one of the ones we're going to be doing is doing these where we talk about cookbooks and get into stuff. We'll also start adding recipes and stuff. I think when I post this, it's going to be posted on I think it's going to be Monday the 17th. I might also post a different recipe. I think I've recorded a recipe for like chapati, which is like a flatbread dish here. Maybe I'll post that public as well on my channel. So we'll go into more of that. And we have the Felidia book there. You mentioned the book that you found from your grandfather's place, your grandparents' place. The next dish on dish that we're doing is on Casalula, which we've mentioned before with cheese. He got a book from there too. So I think in the next one we'll talk maybe about all three of those cookbooks. We'll see how long it goes with those. Trying to aim for these releases to be about an hour and a half around there, or new content every Monday for this series. But I think to finish this off, as we've talked about this opening and closing, as we were talking about back in June 14th, 2020, thinking the pandemic has ended. Now that we've had New York City has reopened, we've seen the mandates come in, we've seen protests with Black Lives Matter after those people were kicked out. What was that one restaurant that they were kicked out of? It was a familiar
Carmine's.
name. Carmine's, yeah. I don't know if that's a familiar name for my actual thing or from video games, but it seems to be like, was it in a Godfather movie? Was it in like some gangster movie?
That's a good question because
I think it might have been.
It's not that old. Like it wouldn't be the Godfather era. I mean, I'm trying to think if this opened like 80s or 90s. So not.
It's a common Italian-ish type of name. So maybe it was in Goodfellas, not the actual Carmine's, but maybe somebody in Goodfellas or one of these movies named Carmine had a restaurant and that was called Carmine's in there. But yeah, there was those kind of issues. So I think if you can kind of just give us a bit from being involved in the food industry, some of the thoughts that you had back over a year and a half ago, and then with the follow-up conversation that we had, what's it looking like on the opening and closing? Because I remember that time we were thinking, oh, it's going to be like, we were thinking, I remember the first conversation we had about that. I think it was like a year and a half ago. We were thinking, okay, maybe like, I think it was like, we were talking about 75% or would survive to like 50%. And now like, what's it looking like now that places have actually attempted to reopen? The winter's coming in. The key thing with the winter was they were able to manage with the outdoor type of things. But now when the winter comes in New York City, it snows, it gets super cold. And I saw something like a few licenses for like the lamps were not accepted. So it's like now they're trying to have the mandates for the things and really seeing the battling. So tell us just a bit about the health of the food service industry in New York City from your estimation.
Sure. So some places have reopened even more recently, like Casa Lua only opened maybe like last month, which like surprised me because it just took a while. DB Bistro is still not open. I still have no idea what's going on with that, which is weird because all his other places are open. So that could be that staffing issue, or maybe he's considering closing it. I don't know. But like Andrea and I went to Barbaloo the other day, and that's a lot slower than it used to be. They said in part because of the pandemic, the mandates. They've had outdoor seating this whole time, but they've actually made the outdoor seating permanent. They've actually got these like big heaters put in, and it's well set up. It used to be the outdoor seating was only in the summer, because what it is that wintertime we would do just indoors, and the things we would do like 300 people maybe, but then with the out in the summertime we would do like 600 because the outdoor seating was like a whole other dining room basically. um but that place is quieted down too, because I've talked about it. I mean, Barbaloo, I worked there 2009. I think it was open 2 years before that, so maybe like 2007 or so. And you figure that's going on what, 14 years? So it's like that's a very good run. But I mean that goes through what every other restaurant went through, where it opens, it's a cool new spot, it's booming all the time, then things kind of fade, and it's like, yeah, you still have people coming back, but it's not what it was. And plus issues with chefs coming and going and all that. Um, but then like Minetta is always busy. I mean, I was there last night. I was there like a few minutes after 5 when they opened. The bar was already full. I'm like, wow, I like barely got here in time. But places like that, I think, but places like that, I think they've been around for a while. So it's like they're always busy. Um, I mean, Times Square I always see is busy. Some of these local spots. I mean, the Irish bar I go to up at the street, even I actually sat outside because the inside was packed, and it was nice to see because I went in like on a Saturday the week before and it was quiet. And I'm like, this isn't a good sign, but the city's coming back to life. I know Broadway stuff's open again, so there are a few places that, of course, shuttered, and um, we're gonna see what happens with these mandates. I mean, I know, like Minetta, they say that's why they struggled for a bit because they couldn't do indoor dining, so they can only do outdoor, and they actually did to-go service, which is the first time in their history they did it, but like they had to do
Mhm.
something to keep themselves going. But I'm hoping this mandate either gets rescinded or people can set up outdoor dining with heaters, because it's just like I don't know what's going to happen when it gets cold. Um, some people are saying there's going to be no winter wave. We'll see. I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's like we thought this would be over by now, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
So we said with the now, is that something that Minetta is going to stick with the delivery? Is that the main new thing that you think has been now adopted both by restaurants and also the people who are eating? Like New York City, as some of y'all might know out there, it's rather expensive. There's not too many places with like decent sized kitchens. It's a lot of people eating out on a regular basis for the actual actual food. So is that something that's now more accepted, where people are demanding more of delivery, and then now many restaurants are now more open to that? Do you think that's something that's going to stick?
I think it depends on the place. I mean, I know certain places like Minetta, there's certain items that you can't do to go. Like you couldn't get the foie gras terrine to go because it
Yeah.
oxidizes and also it could melt and things like that. So what some places are doing is they'll say this item's not available for to go, but you can get these. So if you want like the burger and fries, you want a steak, you can do that. Some
That's
places are
smart though.
doing,
That's smart.
yeah, because they basically say, the way I've learned working in food service, the way you frame this to people is you say we don't allow this as a to-go item because it would compromise the quality and it's not up to our standards to serve it. So then if they give you a time, you just say like, look, it's not going to travel well. That's why. Um,
It's
because the
like
thing is, you don't
in-home
want,
advertising. It's like
yeah,
it's like advertising to the person. So it's like we'll give you like a little taster of our food by delivering this to you, and then we'll bait you to
yeah.
actually come in and sit down and yeah.
Yeah, if you want the burger, steak, whatever, like, a braised dish, it's fine. But if you want foie gras terrine, well, it's going to melt, it's going to oxidize. Like, it's not really, we can't really do that. Um, so I think it depends on the place. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd imagine a lot of like bars and things, I know you could get drinks to go for a bit. I don't think they're doing that anymore. But I mean, you could get burgers and sandwiches, of course. Um, I'm not really sure. I haven't looked into how widespread this is, though, as far as.
Okay. Now, are there any old practices in the food service industry that you think are now done, whether they were good or bad, that the pandemic closed down and shut down has kind of ended? We talked in part a bit with the Me Too, which is something that's in all industries, I think, whenever there's power and desire and things like that, and females in general are more physically desirable than males, and when males have power and status, there's going to be always those kind of dynamics, and we talked about that. But are there any food service specific things, even New York City specific things, that you thought, okay, people were doing this in a certain way, maybe even like things like with the people who were hired at certain places, now how are people coming back? Do you know many people in the industry who are like, okay, I'm not coming back to food service, or I've left New York City? Like, for the people that you know, can you give us a bit of an update or some thoughts on that?
I'm not really sure. I mean, some people have moved out of the city. I mean, you know, a few of them, I think, but there was for other reasons. Like they're just worried about the future of the city itself. I don't think that was entirely because of COVID. Um, as far as people who've left the industry, I'm trying to think. Aside from me, I'm not really sure. Like I know one of my friends had issues finding a job because stuff's shutting down, but I guess he's okay now. Um, I know like somebody I know was talking about starting his own business with his wife. He has a food service background, so there's that. I'm trying to think because I know some people there were issues. Well, because there were issues before with like getting hours because places could only be open limited hours or less capacity. But now it's the inverse problem where because we're experiencing these labor shortages where people don't want to work. Like these places are busy and people are working all the time. Like I have this one friend who works at Minetta and like he splits the week. Like a few days he works at this wine bar in Brooklyn, a few days at Minetta, and he makes a lot of money because if they're a little understaffed and he's busy, it's like he's making a lot of money. But there's also a point where he's going to have to cut back because he's going to burn himself out. Like if you do 5-6 days a week and you run around all the time, it's going to be too much. So I think what he's doing, what some people do too, and I did this as well, is you work a lot now when things are busy. Then when January comes, everything's quiet. Okay, you've saved up all this money from when things are good, and then it's like if you work fewer hours, at least you've saved enough where you can kind of ride it out until things are good again. I sort of learned that the hard way because it's easy to think like I'm making all this money, go out, spend it, but then like you realize this doesn't last forever, and it's like after you do that a few times, you sort of plan ahead and you realize like save a lot of this money when things are good, and then if you go through a rough spot, at least you're fine to sort of like ride out the storm until things are good again. Yeah, I don't know a ton of people whose careers have really changed that much. I mean, maybe if I went through everybody, I know there would be some, but not a whole lot stands out to me. Yeah.
And what are some other names that you think have closed down during this pandemic that you're sick of? That sucks. That place is gone. You've mentioned a few in this whole series, but just tell us what else is there.
Yeah, like there was Bar Bacon. That was a place I used to go to. There was one by me, and there was one to Union Square. That was the one that featured all those dishes with bacon. Like you get slabs of bacon, BLT, bacon burger, all that. That closed both locations. The Brazen Fox, that's that place we covered that burger. Abraham and I used to hang out by Union Square. That closed. DB Bistro, I'm still kind of wondering because there's no for sale sign or anything, but like it had they're like we're temporarily closed, and it's kind of like all your other restaurants are open. Why is this closed? I don't know the deal with that. I'm trying to think who else went under. Oh, there was that place, the Beatrice Inn I talked about, but she opened a new place, the Three Horses, I guess it's kind of similar. I think the menu's scaled down a little bit. I've been meaning to check that out. That's an old school French. The owner is Chinese descent, but she's worked in like a lot of French places. Danielle Ballou actually opened a new place, which is interesting. Pavillon, I think it's called, yeah, which is interesting. I mean, it's another high-end place. I'm trying to think. Oh, 11 Madison Park is going to a vegan menu, which will be interesting. I don't really know how that'll be,
fully
but
vegan for the
as far as I know, yeah. So
wow.
We'll see how that goes. I'm kind of disappointed, but I mean, maybe
are they going to be using like they might be using like Impossible Meat or something? Because yeah, that's interesting.
But that's a 3 Michelin star restaurant, so I'm wondering
that's
like how. Yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
I mean,
that's
if they can pull it off, if they can pull it off, I'll be impressed. But we'll see. I'm trying to think what else. The Modern reopened recently. I've been meaning to go back there. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, I know a lot of like little local spots closed, but like there weren't any like really big names where I was like, wow, I'm surprised at this. Because I think some of the big names too, they have enough money from different groups, and like I know Danielle, he sells like cookware, books, and other things too. So it's like I think they could kind of ride things out to a point, and then just once things are better, reopen. But it's tough for these really little like independently owned places.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, there's going to be issues with the mandates and things like that because that Carmine situation that we talked about, these are people from out of town, and you're going to have people coming in from locations that are not as strict with the whole like with the papers, show us the papers. They're not as strict with that, so there's going to be some strife for that. But I think once we get to about next year, I know we talked about this last year, and maybe a year from now we'll have another follow-up. Like we're still going on through this pandemic, but I think things will open up. We're already seeing different ways of therapeutics with things like this, like officially approved therapeutics are there. There's just in general with all these kind of things. If you have like 100 people can get something, after a certain amount of time, all 100 people who can get it have gotten it and either unfortunately succumbed to it or have gotten some kind of vaccination or some kind of natural immunity or some fought it off where it gets to the point where there's fewer people who can have it. And at that point, even though we know it's antithetical to the state to rescind certain laws and rules that it has, I think just in general, just from people wanting to just have a life, by a year from now, you're going to have a lot of people who are very adamant and very, very reactionary to what's going on now, pretending like, oh, we knew the whole time that it wasn't as big a deal. You know, we're just being careful. Like, oh, what do you mean we were demanding this? We weren't demanding that. Nobody. Like, come on, don't be crazy. Like, I can imagine that this being something that a lot of people try to just ghost out of their mind, like they already ghost some of the fears and declarations that were being made a year ago or back in June 14th of 2020 when we were talking about this. I'm sure there's people who are saying certain things at that time who are singing a different kind of tune now and things like that. But
yeah, because I saw, like, I think in Ontario they're talking about, instead of doing vaccine, they would do negative tests, and like that's something someone like I was wondering, because it's like, you know, if you see me coming into a place every week for months on end, I don't show symptoms, like, what are you worried about? And it's like, if I have to, I can go get tested. Okay, you're negative. It's like, what's the big deal? Like, why are you so worried? And then, you know, this whole thing about, you know, oh, you have the vaccine, you won't spread it. Oh, you can spread it anyway. And it's like they're going back and forth on that. And it's just like, I don't know. It's like the narrative. I mean, the narrative has been crumbling for some time, but I always think of what Ivor Cummins said about, you know, a virus, the way it mutates is like skipping a rock across a pond. Like the first one is bad, the second one might be bad, but then third, fourth, it gets weaker and weaker. Like there's not going to be a horrific third, fourth, fifth wave of this. It doesn't happen. I mean, like no virus has ever evolved in such a way. And it's like, at this point, the only reason people are scared is because the media is hyping it up and because government's like pushing all these mandates. But it's like, if it weren't for those things, like you would have no idea. So it's just like how much further do they have to hype this up? Where it's like, guys, like you're just making stuff up at this point, you know?
Yeah, there's been too many unknown unknowns where people are just like, oh, we don't know these things, and then we get to make these declarations. But then now we're getting close to the point where all the unknowns are known, where it's like, okay, somebody's unknown to have this, but we know how to know, or we know the known things about this. We know enough about this to know that it's dangerous in these kind of things, and we're going to be able to combat it in this kind of way. And that was I guess that's a good place as any to end this. I'm kind of glad that I kind of forgot like you worked at Felidia, because that's the thing, we talked about this the last time we talked about a non-dishing on dish You Are What You Consume series, was talking about the unknown known location. He knew that he was working here. It's unknown when it was going to open. So there's a bit of trepidation in that, and now we're getting to this point where now he knows it's not going to open. And Stephen will also be back on for the I Know Great People series eventually to tell us about what he's doing now, because you can already get the I Know Great People series about his experience in the food service industry, and in that one he tells us about how he entered it and he started it, and then now here in this conversation you've gotten a lot more detail about the last place that he worked in the food service industry. So it kind of like puts those things together, and maybe you can get him on this project that we're doing now. This will be the kind of thing that we're doing more of. So anything else you want to tell them about Felidia and just this conversation in the end?
Not really. I mean, I think I was planning to do a presentation about Felidia itself, where we can walk through different dishes. I have some photos of the food, and then I could talk a little bit more in depth about the restaurant itself. But I think that's enough for the purpose of this conversation.
Yeah. So depending on when you're listening to this, that'll probably be up already somewhere with this whole series and things like that.
Yep.
But yeah, otherwise, Stephen, thank y'all. And as we mentioned, we will be back next week. We should go getting back to the actual food, and Casa Lula is what we have on deck, and we have a few other things listed out for that. But we'll also be back on this You Are What You Consume series, talking about the next one in the You Are What You Consume series. We'll be talking about the cookbook type of stuff. And in that Casa Lula, check out Dishing a Dish One, because he also has a cookbook that we mentioned slightly in that in-depth talk, but then we'll have a separate one where we still haven't figured out how we'll be doing more of the cookbook things. Eventually, I think we'll get to the point where if we talk about a cookbook, talk about different things, and then maybe we figure out ahead of time or after to actually attempt to make one or two of the dishes from the actual cookbook on our own and things like that. But yeah. So it's been enjoyable as usual, Stephen, these conversations. Guys, gals, and everyone else in between, thank you all for listening. Stephen, you can stay on after we say goodbye. But that's it for me.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.